My name is Tim Johnson. I'm originally from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. That's where I got my undergraduate degree in botany. I'm sorry, I was actually in biology. We didn't have a botany program, but I took all the botany courses that I could. And I got hooked on orchids while watching a James Bond video. The bad guy in James Bond was growing orchids, and they had this big fictional backstory about how the orchid was poisonous, which of course wasn't true, but it got me curious. It wasn't something that I'd seen or heard much of before. And after I got done with my undergraduate program, I started looking into programs that were working with orchids. And it was sort of a difficult decision. I didn't want my hobby, which was growing orchids, to become my profession. So I'd applied to a couple of different schools. One of them was an ethnobotany program. Another one of them was a horticulture program dealing with new foreign crops for the American market. And I fought it and actually ended up down at Florida where Scott Stewart and Phil Cowth had set themselves up, and they were doing some native orchid research. Well, I had talked to Dr. Vendrame, who had some money and some funding to work with Vandas, and that's how I ended up here. So my big project now is working with Vandas, and more than anything, giving some exposure to Vandas. So working on the commercial production, trying to get growers interested in growing Vandas large scale. Right now, Phalaenopsis really dominate the market. 75 to 85% of all orchids sold are Phalaenopsis. Well, I think that Vandas could actually help to crack into that market. Now, this is especially useful because currently the demand for orchids isn't quite being met. And as people become more used to growing Phalaenopsis, they're going to want to grow different plants. And so Vandas may be a great way to introduce them to other plants.
How about your experience at UF?
Well, I have a couple of different things that I'm working on. The first is straightforward seed germination of Vanda hybrids and also Ascocenda hybrids. So working with just seed, optimizing media, optimizing photo period, just doing straightforward seed germination. It's an easy way to make a lot of plants, a lot of high quality plants. The next part of my project then looks at clonal propagation. So once a plant is picked out as being a supreme, an elite line, we can clonally propagate it. We can make lots and lots of plants that look exactly like this plant. That's a prototype. So that's the second big part of my project then, is developing a way to clone plants that are proven desirable. These are plants that have color traits that are unusual or exceptional. They're extremely bright. They've got a color that's just a little bit better than all their siblings. Their color form is better. They tolerate cold a little bit better. So that's the part of cloning. Ultimately, giving these plants exposure and doing some of this research into propagation will hopefully get commercial growers interested so that they will expand. So they'll stop cultivating and growing just Phalaenopsis and just Dendrobium, and they'll get into growing Vandas. The big challenge I see right now is a breeding problem, that Vandas traditionally have been seen as difficult to grow. They're large plants. Sometimes they take a long time to bloom, up to 8 or 9 years. But a lot of breeding is being done to bring down the time for flowering, to make them more cold tolerant, and this is going to expand the latitudes that we can sell them in. So hopefully someday we'll actually be able to sell Vandas in Wisconsin.